Well, hello, and welcome everyone to our BG5 Live. We're having a little bit of problem getting onto to Facebook Live, so we're just going to do it live here in our Zoom room, and hopefully we'll get everything connected. Welcome to everyone who is watching us here live in our Zoom room. Also, welcome to everyone who's watching the recording as well. So today is May 12th, 2020. This is episode number 52. And today we're going to take a look at trait 23. And we're going to take a look at opening the door to change. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. Now, before we get started, let's say hello to our panel. Unfortunately, Chris can't join us today. So Chris will be back with us next week. So let's start with Natalie. So Natalie, hello, welcome.
There we go. Hi,
we go.
Thanks. Yes. It's a wonderful day.
Yes.
Opening the door to change, changing all over.
Exactly. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here. And Lavina.
Hello, my friends. So glad to be here with you.
Great to have you here. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in, and let's take a look at this opening to the door of change. So as we started to talk about last week, we're really taking a look at journeying into sort of this area of assimilation. The splitting apart is what we're looking at today. And we're really taking a look at entering into, it's almost like a doorway. We can see even the trait itself, if we take a look at the hexagram, it looks like a doorway. And so we're actually entering through this doorway into form, into civilization, into manifestation, as we took a look at, because most of the traits are in communication and action in the throat. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the journey through form, and then we're going to just sort of track it as we go through, taking a look at what's happening as well. So again, when we take a look at form, what's interesting is that form really begins with the individual. So we took a look at last week where it began. It began with the individual. It began with the driver into. So that's where we were last week. And then we move into three voices of the individual. So three voices of individuality. We start with today, we have assimilation. We move into the 8 with contribution. And then we move into the 20 with contemplation. So I just thought it was very interesting that moving into form, it all starts with an individual voice. And so we moved into the driver, into 2 on May 3rd. Again, we took a look at this last week. This was the time to change direction. So this is when we started reopening after the worldwide shutdown and the pandemic. And then as we move in today, we moved into actually assimilation, May 9th. So we're going to be taking a look at quality 4 today. So we moved in May 9th into assimilation. And again, this is opening up the door for change. So we're kind of in that place of really starting to shift and change. So with that, let's take a look at assimilation. So if we take a look at what assimilation is, it's also splitting apart, and it's the eliminating of intolerance. So it's the unique insight that opens the door to change and mutation. Now, the picture I have here is the, my screen is really small here, is the, yes, the Sasquatch Music Festival in 2009. And I don't know if you've seen this video, but I recommend you look up this video on YouTube. There's this guy, he's just dancing, right? We're talking about, form, a civilization starting through the individual. So it's just this individual dancing. And what we're taking a look at here is also this sort of genius to freak, if you will, as well, right? So it's kind of a freak. He's the only one that's out there dancing. And then by the end, you can see the entire crowd. There's one guy that started with them, you know, and then there's two guys dancing, and then more joined in, and then more joined in, and then more joined in. So where we take a look at change, where we take a look at mutation, is we take a look at this change and mutation. It starts with the individual. So it's this unique insight that opens the door to change, opens the door to mutation. And it's the unique voice that can cut through mental intolerance. And it is the voice of I know. And again, what's interesting is whenever we have the 23 defined as the background theme, it also activates the 43 at the other end. So we also have a strength that's connected here. This is moving away from conformity and towards diversity, right? So everybody's conforming, they're all sitting down, you know, this one guy, he's out dancing, right? And then it's, you know, this diversity of everybody dancing in their own way. And it's opening the door to allow new ways of thinking to take hold. And it's insights that are potentially different and transformative. And when those insights are potentially different and transformative, they require that you communicate their essence very clearly. And this is, again, creating this definition, this genius to freak, you know, of efficiency and structuring. Right. So this is a very unusual trait, and it's very interesting that we're starting, you know, taking a look at form. We're starting with this individual voice. We're starting, in a sense, with this individual mutation where it starts with one and it starts to build. So I wanted to just take a look, Natalie or Lavina, if there's something that you'd like to add. Also, anyone who is here live in our Zoom room, since we can't get on Facebook Live, if you're here live on our Zoom room, if you'd like to speak as well, we can unmute you. We'd love to hear from you as well. So anything, Natalie or Lavina, that you want to say or add to this as we start to take a look at this 23 of assimilation?
I'd love to comment that I adore the example that you put there. It really illustrates it perfectly, since this does create a definition that creates individuality. And it's also fascinating. I love how we're going through step by step all of these different traits around the wheel. And in your last slide, you clearly delineated that we have all of those first four traits are all voices, or three traits, voices of individuality in the communication and action, and then that first one in identity. And then interestingly enough, if you go back one where we were before, 2 weeks ago, we were in 24. So we have a whole slew of individuality that creates our transition from mind into form. And having had this 23 in quality 5 my whole life, and being able to see how I can finally start to structure things once I actually get a grasp of what I can be certain of. It's a beautiful thing to know about yourself, that, yeah, sometimes we can, you know, not be able to explain, and yet sometimes we do have this capacity to inform or be able to express our knowing. Sometimes, you know, it just like, it comes and goes. It's really, really like there or not. So that's another thing too, I would think would be helpful for people to know about this, is that you can't force it. It just comes when it comes, you know, the expression of knowing. And if you don't really know what you're talking about, or even if you do know what you're talking about, if people aren't open to hearing you, if they're not on the same frequency, you'll be dismissed as a freak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Exactly. And it, you know, it's a struggle to be an individual in many respects, right? Because the tribe, right, is suspicious of it. The collective is suspicious. Nobody really likes change, but we're really entering into a new change. And I was thinking, I forgot what the game show is where you get, you know, do you want to choose what's behind door number 1 or door number 2 or door number 3? You know, it's sort of like in this assimilation, we're moving into, in a sense, this mutation. It's sort of, you know, this splitting apart and, you know, choosing the door that we're moving into. Yeah, and again, sometimes it's the tribe and the collective resist change. You know, oftentimes we resist change, you know, but this is really a change in direction. And this is, in a sense, the first step in the change of direction is going through this doorway. And I just find it absolutely fascinating that the 23 also looks like a doorway as well.
Yes, yeah, that is, especially that it is like a door. And I don't have this trait myself, but I do have a connection with the individual circuitry. And it's interesting that change and evolution and the quantum leap and the etc. comes through individuality, right? And this inner knowing. And what stuck in my mind about this, being able, having this trait and also it now being in the background frequency, especially since it's, you know, the full strength is defined, you may get inner knowing, but have difficulty to express. And that's actually what you are here to do, to find ways to be able to express what you know, so that the collective and the tribe can understand what you talk about, because you are, you know, light years ahead. The things you know are uncommon to us, the collective. And so to learn to, and also not be bumped if, you know, like Lavina says, the first time you share something and they don't get it, and they don't understand the frequency you're talking about, you know, just it takes time, and it takes time for people to take in change and to adapt to change, etc. So it will take you over, and it will take a few times explaining before, you know, the group gets there. But on the other hand, so this is really about expressing, you know, in voice, and I know, but I like the photo and the example you have. It's also living out the example and being yourself, and with that empowering other people to just be themselves. And yeah, we've talked about this over and over again, but now especially it's so valuable to have this information, to be able to live truly to who you are. And I hope that all those freaks will now be recognized as geniuses and valued for what they contribute, right, to humanity. So yeah, it's fascinating times we live in, and for sure, whatever way we will go, this doorway, this 23, this year in 2020 is a special door. It's a change in history. It you know, the world, there's a world before the event and there's a world after the event, in whatever way it will come out. But yeah, so it this year, this opening of the door of change and mutation, it really is it will be an amazing mutation, whichever way it goes. It's going to be different. It is different, and people start to think, and yeah, I think I shared this last week as well, you know, come to themselves. So maybe this frequency right now is even more powerful as we are open to it, right? We are, you know, in our own sort of auras, in our own environment, getting back to ourselves and open to allowing this to flow through, and not just be on their go of everyday life, you know, running around with like headless chickens.
Yeah.
So yeah, allowing new ways of thinking to take hold. There's a lot of new thinking out there.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and whether we like it or not, whether we, you know, are aligned with it or not, things are changing. You know, we've talked about this a lot. You know, we're in this 7-year cycle towards 2027, and this is almost, in a sense, an opening to the door of moving away from the era of planning and moving towards the era of the individual. Again, we can see that this, in a sense, is where it starts. as we were talking about before.
It's taking it starts taking form now. So that's
Exactly.
yeah.
And I was just kind of giggling with both what you and Lavina were talking about with, sometimes you're able to express things very clearly and sometimes not. And I was teaching the first class of my certification 2 today, and it gets into attributes, which is really complex. And I was like, wow, it's like I was having a hard time. I felt like I was having a hard time explaining it as well. I think people got it, but at the same time, it's like, oh, that's what's going on. And I think that's one of the magic things about understanding what the background frequency is that it's like, wow, I haven't, I felt like I was stumbling a little bit. I feel like I'm stumbling a little bit today. I'm not being able to speak quite clearly. So it can be, you have to speak it clearly or not. Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. And so I'm just noticing that for myself, how I'm struggling to describe things. Yeah, all good. Rachel said, we got it, Karen, thanks. So she was in class earlier. So yeah, thank you. Yeah. So it's, like trying to, communicate really detailed, different, unique information can sometimes be very difficult.
Yes, it can. And this information especially is very detailed and very, it goes on and on and on and on and on. I mean, you can learn your whole life about this, and each level is a level deeper and a level further in details, and yes, it can be. And the other thing that just popped to my mind also, it is a strength that is a projected strength. So whatever you know and whatever you want to share, wait till you are invited, to be sure, to make sure at least that your audience at least is open to listening to what you have to share, instead of forcing it on to people. And in these days, there are different opinions on a lot of things, right? I mean, about COVID and where it comes from, what you can do about it, how to treat it, how how the how do you say that, the stay-at-home orders in the different states, in the different, how to go about in reintegrate. So it's very different. So before you throw out your opinion this week or these days, right, wait until you are invited to, if you feel like your the partner you're talking to is open to what you have to share. Yeah. And then share your inner knowing, your inner truth, which is true for you anyway. So it's your inner truth.
Really good point. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting what the trait happens to be as well. If we take a look at it, if we take a look at quality 4, it's about fragmentation. And remember, whenever we're taking a look at quality 4, this is the influencer. This is diversification without perceived potential for synthesis. So it's kind of like things are, like this picture, things are kind of breaking apart, things are splitting apart. I think we're seeing this a lot in the news, like what is real and what is not real. What is a conspiracy theory and what is not a conspiracy theory? What is truth and what is not truth? And so there's sort of this splitting apart of like, things are shifting, things are changing. And if we take a look at the elevation, it's the individual expression which has no collective value. It's fatalism. And egoism and damn the consequences, so it's, this change and mutation no matter what. Or the challenge, which is the individual expression, which engenders isolation and fear, atheism and paranoia, right? So again, as we've, been moving through this crisis, we're seeing all kinds of things show up that's like, it's hard to make sense of. Like I said, is it real? Is it not real? Are things, do things need to continue to shut down? Or, is there a political agenda behind it? I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going on. And it is sort of this fragmentation of things sort of splitting apart that in a sense open up. If we take a look at the doorway is something that's splitting apart, right? We're opening up something to be able to walk through. And so there is this fragmentation, so it can feel a little, like things are too divided. There's too, like, how is this ever going to come together, right? How are we ever going to decide on one thing or one direction? Some states want to lock down for another 3 months. Some want to open right away. Some are already open. What do we do? So it's this diversification without a perceived potential for synthesis. How do we bring this all together? It feels like it's just splintering apart, right? But that's what we're moving towards, is how does it all get reconciled? But right now we're kind of in that splintering phase where it's sort of splintering apart. Yeah, and that complexity, yeah, I love what you said, Rachel. Complexity brings stress, right? So if you're not certain and there's a lot of change and it's hard to understand, right, that can engender isolation and fear, right? Because like, what's going on? How do you make sense of it? How does it all come together? Yeah, Lavina.
So this is an interesting thing that I just kind of saw, and I'm wondering, when we assimilate this trait, this is called assimilation. When it gets to quality 5, so the next step tomorrow, it's about the practical acceptance of the values of another path. And in order to explain something very simply, oftentimes we need to break it down into small components, right? We need to break it into its individual components in order to explain it clearly. And I find it fascinating that in order to influence, because this is the quality of the fourth expression of 23, assimilation, it's about breaking it into fragments in order to influence, so there might be this, the elevation, the damn the consequences, this is fatalism and this is egoism, or there's that atheism and paranoia, and all of it is fragmented. But it's an evolutionary step along the path of being able to get the message out about what we need to know, right?
Yeah. Beautifully said. Really beautifully said. I was just, I'm just giggling again too, for those that were in the class today. It was taking a look at these, these minute details, but then also taking a look at, how do you synthesize it? And sometimes, it's kind of, you get so much in the details that at some point you don't see, oh, how do you really synthesize it? And then being able to, finally have it come apart, but finally have it come together. But that's a lot of, when we're walking through and taking a look at, for example, in BG5, it is taking a look and looking at the individual pieces, sort of, splintering it apart, taking a look at the diversification, taking a look at all the pieces, and in a sense, in understanding the pieces, eventually there's the potential for synthesis. But again, this is, at that time, this diversification without perceived potential for synthesis. So, again, always kind of looking at both sides of the coin, where, we have one side of the coin, we have the other side of the coin, but sometimes we don't have the perspective of the whole coin itself. So I think what we're seeing right now is, in a sense, what is fragmented, that eventually it's going to come together, but it's going to come together, as Natalie was saying, in a completely different way, right? Something that is new, that's different, that's unique, that's more effective, that's more efficient.
Efficiency. Yeah. So it's and it will come together in a way that we cannot imagine yet, which is, I actually said it to you yesterday when we after class. It's such a beautiful and fascinating time, that what will come together, eventually, we haven't seen it yet or experienced it yet. So it is, so even in this period, I start watching things or observing things that are like, whoa, I wouldn't even have gotten there with my current knowledge. And this is exactly what it is. It's coming through in a knowing something that's not current knowledge yet, right? To make things more efficient in the world, and it's outer authorities to bring it to the world. So it's but what I also like, because I find this particular one a little bit difficult to relate to, fatalism and egoism, the damn the consequences. That's not my style, but I'm a fifth line, so that's probably why I don't have a lot of fourth lines, fourth qualities. So when we saw the image of the 23, the hexagram image, which has these 6 lines actually, you know, in 2 parts or in 1 part, and you know, all of the 64 have a different construct, but this is how each trait and how actually everything in life builds up from, you know, an inner kind of contemplation, right? And then here is the first step, the fourth line quality is the first step towards, you know, getting the message out there, but just to the people you know and you relate to, right? It's the influencer, the influencing your networks. And then quality 5 is, you know, getting it out in a broader way. And I loved what Lavina brought up, because I can relate more to tomorrow than to today. But, you know, that's me. But it's fascinating how each time it's kind of this continuous process, and each time also, you know, one step further in yeah, these cycles, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'd love to hear from you, Lavina, a little bit more about how, you know, how the 23 shows up for you and how you experience it.
Oh, thank you. This is fun. So being able to explain what I know, I used to have a lot of, you know, a challenging time expressing anything. So in the beginning of my life and human design experience, I really had a deep insecurity about how to explain things, because I didn't have a consistency inside of my head of what I knew. But as I've been learning, you know, us as advisors are here to master something, as I've been evolving as a human and learning about this system, being able to explain something, I find, because it's my personal law, it really helps ease my relationships, all of them, all over across the board. So the other thing is too, is that I have an expansiveness, because we know it translates into Jupiter as part of the life aspect. And so there's this sometimes talking around in circles where it's very, you know, and I have to bring it back to what's the most practical thing to explain right here, right now. And seeing that it's a law, I know that if I can just keep it to what's practical rather than going all over the map, it will be better received by the other person. So I'm doing my best as I learn about these things to try and just keep it shorter, because oftentimes if I go on too long, people only remember maybe the first thing if it was really impactful and the last thing that you said. So if you keep talking, what I've learned is to get much more succinct and the point gets across. So that's my personal experience.
Beautiful. I love it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Lavina. And we also like to bring forth a celebrity as well. I thought I would have a hard time finding someone, because it's actually a 4-1, right? And and here we have the 4-1. This is Stevie Wonder, and so Stevie Wonder is a singer, a songwriter. He has 23-4, has his life work theme as a 4-1, and so his life work theme is assimilation. So you are an engaging person given the task of repeating an unfamiliar insight until it becomes familiar or is assimilated by friends who have the grace to listen. And if we, you know, Stevie Wonder, he was blind shortly after his birth. And he was a child prodigy known as Little Stevie Wonder. And that led him to, you know, sign with a Motown record label at the age of 11. And he became one of the most creative and loved musical performers of the late 20th century. And so, again, just in a sense, it's, you know, this insight you know, and the fact that he happened to be blind, I think also, you know, so that the music in a sense came from someplace, you know, really deep inside, if you will. And, you know, so it was very engaging. And, you know, and the repeating an unfamiliar insight, right, until it became familiar. And, you know, so with, you know,
Yeah,
through his
and
music, be able to communicate that.
individual circuitry is acoustic. So,
Mhm.
which is, you know, and being blind even more, how do you say that? They're relying on sound and how things sound and music, etc. So, yeah, wonderful. Again, I don't know, Lavina, if you have anything to say, and it's even fixed in his life work. Wow.
Yeah. And that's one of the things to really, and I thought, you know, it's like, oh, there's no way I'm going to find someone who's a 4-1. It's the first one that I looked up, and he happened to be a 4-1. And one of the things with the 4-1, this is the public role. So the public role is about an influencer and is about an authority, and, you know, it's very fixed, right? So, you know, so it really is, in a sense, sort of representing what assimilation is all about. Representing what, you know, what this whole trait happens to be about. So whenever there's a 4-1, again, they're very fixed and very set in their ways, and at the same time, they represent, in a sense, the essence of what the trait really is. So you can see that his life fork theme is also assimilation, which is also what the trait is about.
Yes, Lavina.
Yeah, thank you. That's one of those really cool, if you can remember the rule or the quality of what's going on here with those who are 4-1s as far as their life aspects. You can see that the name of their life work is labeled after either the trait itself or something very closely related to the trait itself, because it's here to externalize what that trait has to offer. And I love that you guys recognize the, you know, the individuality of him and his acoustic expression of himself. And the two strengths that he has are very abstract. So we know that they're deeply emotional. They're filled with rich visual essence, where there's this quality. If you listen to his music and the sounds, it gives you this warmth and this awareness about, you know, the experiences. So he's literally taking you along for a ride with what he knows, what he's experienced and what he knows. And so he's able to influence with his experiences, his emotional imagination and actual commitment to life that he's had this experience of. So it's cool to see his chart. Thanks for finding that.
Yeah, yeah, it worked out perfectly. I love it. Wonderful. Well, I was wondering if there is anyone who is currently in our Zoom room who would either like to share something. We don't have anything obviously in our Facebook Live, but if there's anyone here that is attending live who would like to share anything, or has a unique insight or aha, or can relate, or has the 23 within their career design, we would love to hear from you. And I think, can they raise their hand? How does that work?
Yeah, they can raise their hand. You can raise your hand, guys, and or type it in, and we can allow you to talk if you want to. I don't know if any of you have this trait in their design. I could look up a bit, but I actually didn't. Usually I kind of pull up charts if I recognize some names.
It's so funny. This is with my class. Everything seems very quiet today.
Everybody's really, you know, inside.
Can I explain this clearly or not? Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and just wrap everything up then. If we, again, if you are new to BG5, we do invite you to get a free report. Take a look at our website, bg5businessinstitute.com. You can also track what's the background frequency of the day as it changes. If you go to BG5 Live, you can also find our past episodes in our free resource library as well. So make sure you check that out. Our new courses started last week and this week. We also have some courses that are coming up in June as well. So please check out our schedule and join aboard. We'd love to have you in one of our courses. And once again, thank you for being here. So I'd like to hear just last words of wisdom, if you will, to wrap up for today. Anything, Natalie or Lavina, that you would like to share, just what people should be aware of, what's happening, what they should take in as we go through and finish up this 23 before we move into the 8 of contribution, which we'll take a look at next week.
Yeah, so well, for me, since I was fascinated by not relating to the fourth quality, it's probably something that we will see play out today, right? So in the news or in stands of people formulating something, throwing out there, right? And really choosing sides right now. And then how it evolves, you know, over tomorrow, getting, kitty. Your kitty is so funny. Hello, yes, what do you want to share with the people today? So for me, it's observing, because, you know, nothing comes to mind for me, but really seeing, you know, how the world evolves and what pops up for you in your world.
Yeah.
Lavina.
Yes, Lavina.
So this is one of those interesting places around the wheel that when we get to a trait, and once in a while this happens, where the trait in the sun, or this is the core essence, because of the way that it's showing up in a opposition in the wheel and creating a strength, a consistent strength, everyone this week needs to be very careful not to make mental decisions based on what they say they think they know. and this is a place where, because, you know, we've gone over all of the different aspects of how this can show up, but really it swings between the ease or the exhalation and the challenge in a very, very extremes. So if you find yourself, you know, and you're confused or not clear about why you're behaving this way with your voice, with your expression, just ignore it because it's not what you need to base your decisions on. So you might feel, oh, got to be more friendly, or, you know, because we don't have the availability, there's this damn the consequences and all of this, you know, insistence that I know, we need to go this way, or I'm going to go this way, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that because. And it's the because that you have to be very careful of, because the mind right now is being conditioned to think it knows. And so if you do something, damn the consequences, and you might vacillate to that experience that engenders isolation and fear, don't take it personally. Don't give any weight to what you hear yourself or what anybody else says. Don't take it personally, because this is what everybody is dealing with right now, and we're all going to deal with it differently, experience it differently. So I had the same experience of not really being able to talk clearly this week, because I do have that 23 and you know, the next quality tomorrow. I hope that made sense, but that was what came out.
Very much sense.
Right? Isn't it funny?
Yeah, I know, it's hilarious, because I'm finding myself too just like, blah. It's kind of not being able to say things or express myself in the way that you know, that I feel that I normally can. So I think what Lavina brought up is a really good point. You know, we can very much be in our heads thinking that we're certain, thinking that we know when we really don't, right? So especially, you know, if you don't have either of these functions defined, one or the other or both, you have to also be careful, because now it's being defined and now we think that we know, but we may not really know, right? So just, again, follow your decision-making strategy, because if you make decisions, this is not a strength to make decisions from. It's just about I know, but it's not about taking action. And your mind, right, can have, just like Lavina was saying, make up all excuses, make up all these stories of why you should or why you shouldn't, or how you know or how you don't know, right? So again, it's just allowing everything to be, watching the movie, watching as things unfold, and allowing them to unfold as they will and as they need to. Yeah, and Lavina was saying, I have to explain my certainty, right? This is part of what this strength is all about, you know, in addition to that trait. So again, not only do we have a trait, we also have a strength that's activated as well. So it's even, we need to be even more cautious of the conditioning of this particular strength and trait. Yeah, exactly. All right, everyone. It has been our absolute pleasure. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being with us through this entire process. So again, just stay awake, stay alert, follow your decision-making strategy, and we will see you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.